But so, the four distinct moments in JavaScript time. So, I'm guessing at these dates they're not that important, but around 1996, JavaScript was created, right? And this guy made it in 10 days. Um, and he was probably pretty smart. And his name's Brandon Ike. He actually started Mozilla. So like Firefox is, made by the organization that was made by that dude that made JavaScript. That's why uh, the definitive docs on JavaScript, right? So if you go like array, I don't know, map, JavaScript, right? You're going to get to the first link that pops up here, at least for me, is the Mozilla Developer Network, right? And this is like an invaluable resource. This is like basically documentation covering all of JavaScript, right? And it's not really biased towards Mozilla. Like it's actually going to show you down at the bottom of these docs. It will show you like browser compatibility across different browsers, right? And so that's nice of them because this is made by Firefox, so they could just I don't know, not do that. But so anyways, that guy made JavaScript in 1996, and basically it was made as kind of this thing that allowed you to edit HTML in real time, right? HTML and CSS, and or like after your page is loaded, right? And so it allowed for interactivity with HTML. And the thing was, like what people thought was going to be the thing that you could like interact with websites with was these Java applets. Like people thought that Java was going to be the tool used on the front end. You've probably seen these on like really old sites sometimes, like a bank website or something. So that obviously did not become true. But at the time, Java was was a winner, and so to make it like politically palatable, and non-threatening to Sun, which was making Java. The JavaScript was called JavaScript, and it was kind of like, oh, this is just this little thing that's paying its respects to you guys, and it's not a big deal, right? Made it in 10 days, so that it was snuck into Netscape, right? And so if you guys remember, at one point browsers, like there was a ton of them, right? So there was like Juno, there was like all these free browsers, right? It really had yet to consolidate at one point, but because browsers weren't free, so people would actually pay for browsers, right? Until Internet Explorer was included in Windows. So particularly at that time, JavaScript was like a terrible thing to use, right? And the reason for that is because it would work a different way in each browser, right? So we're talking about the history of JavaScript. But so it would.
After 6.
Oh yeah.
Everything's locked.
Yeah, dude.
With the elevator, someone had to like put their card in to the fourth floor.
Yeah, I guess you should be on time. Yeah. No, it's not a big deal. Anyways, so basically JavaScript worked inconsistently across browsers. So you obviously want to be able to build one web page and have that work across browsers. And so that was a really difficult thing to do. And so JavaScript was like full of all these if statements. At the time, there was no way to debug it, so you would like literally print out stuff into an HTML element if you wanted to like figure out what your code was doing. And it was terrible. But mostly because of this inconsistency issue. And what came along and solved that was this tool called jQuery, which you probably have all heard of. One thing that jQuery did is it kind of standardized selectors, and that was kind of a really big thing. So it made it so you could easily, I'm not going to go into it, but basically jQuery allows you to use the same selectors you use in CSS. to select HTML elements. So that level of consistency at the time, and especially the fact that it could slide in with something people already knew, because people already knew CSS, meant that jQuery was like a game changer. You didn't have to learn anything new, and all of a sudden you could do all this cool stuff. And so, there's tons of libraries that are made that just work off of jQuery, right? And jQuery is still like alive and well. It's probably on like 80% of like websites. Like even sites that use React will like sometimes, like my web application still uses jQuery just because it does this selector thing really well. Like it's there's a few cases where it's nice. But anyways, so then the next revolution in 2009, Node was created. And what Node did is it allowed you to run JavaScript outside of the browser. And so if you think about, so one thing basically, Node is not a language. Node is just something that runs JavaScript, right? So there's an important distinction there, right? Because a language is just like, kind of a specification that's agreed upon, right? Like the English language is just, a set of rules that we've agreed to communicate with, right? But if you can't understand the English language, then it really, when I'm speaking it, someone else needs to be able to hear it and understand it for it to have any use, right? And so languages are kind of the same way, where it's like something needs to be like taking that language and being like, okay, this is what I need to do, right? Based on what this guy just said, right? And so each browser has its own, what's called an interpreter, right? And the interpreter is the thing that's, understanding the language that you're writing, right? And so Chrome's is called V8, Firefox's is called SpiderMonkey, IE's, or at least Edge's, is called Chakra. But so the big thing that happened just prior, like around I think in 2008, is Chrome open sourced, which means it made available the code available to the public, V8, right? It's JavaScript interpreter. And so in 2009, this guy had some time to work on this project using that open source code to allow someone to use JavaScript server side. And so to talk about this for a second, so what I mean by that is like people usually talk about client side and server side. A simpler way to say that would be browser side and computer side, right? Like the browser is the client, the thing that's digesting your website, right? And the thing that other humans that might not know code can interact with. Your server is just a computer that's running a program that says send back a website. And then if other types of requests are made to me and I'm a server, then do other things, right? Send back other information. So Node allowed JavaScript to come out of the browser and come into just our computers, right? Which meant also it could be in servers, right? It doesn't have to be. There's uses for Node other than a web server. So have any of you guys? Well, you can plead the fifth on this, but the application Popcorn Time. I wonder if I have it. I don't. I guess it stopped working.
Movies.
Yeah. So there's this. It was called the Netflix of piracy, right? I can find it, I'm sure. Yeah, this guy. Hope I don't get a virus from here, but yeah. So this thing right here, Popcorn Time. This is like the Netflix of the piracy. the Netflix of piracy, right? Like you guys all remember, like what's it called, Napster and like Kazaa and all these ways that you could like get stuff for free. And there's like BitTorrent, right? Um, so Popcorn Time allowed you to basically download. It allowed like a really nice interface for torrents. I mean, a user didn't even have to know what a torrent was. And Yeah, so Popcorn Time, just as an example, was a Node app that you downloaded it, it ran on your computer, but it was made with Node. And actually, to do that, you use this tool called Electron. If you guys remember, if you were paying real close attention last class, Atom is actually a Node app too, right? Which is why if you go over into Atom and you press Command Option I, right, you can inspect it as if it's like a website, right? But so anyways, so Node coming out of the browser was huge, right? And for a few reasons. I mean, there's some technical reasons, and actually the guy that made it was motivated purely by those. He actually had a C++ background. His name's Ryan Dahl. And he's like this really soft-spoken guy, so it's like he gave this speech on like what Node was, and like kind of only afterwards people were like, oh wow, that's like a really big deal, because his sales skills weren't that great. So he had a C++ background. He actually liked particular language features of JavaScript, and that's why he made Node. So he saw some technical advantages, but what I really have seen is, in myself. I mean, JavaScript is the only language that I know at a professional level, besides VBA, which is this language that hides inside like Microsoft Office. So and like that, someone like me became possible. And I can do like full stack development, right? Like I can make a website completely from scratch. And so what used to happen is that there was this really big distinction between front-end developers and back-end developers, right? Front-end developers basically just made websites pretty with CSS, put content on them, and then made stuff wiggle around with jQuery, right? That was like a front-end developer's job. And I'm minimizing it a bit. I mean, it's really is important because you have to make a website look good, or else no one will put their credit card information into it. But yeah, that was the job of a front end developer. It was basically implementing a designer's work. Then back end guys, they were the ones that were responsible for handling stuff like. So if we look up here, right? Check out this route, right? That's what you could call this. It's kind of this path that's after StackOverflow.com. By the way, Stack Overflow is like an invaluable resource for coding. It is basically people have problems and they ask questions about how to solve them, and they're like coding problems. And so if you Google any problem like how do I make a variable, there will be a Stack Overflow post. But anyways, so look at this thing after StackOverflow.com right here. So this is this thing they call a route, as I move around, that thing changes, right? So like this just changed. Now it's documentation, right? And so servers, the back end is handling, directing me to these different places. It's like, like a traffic marshal, right? And backends also handle, saving stuff, right? Like if a user signs up, you have to save that, right? You save it into a database, but you put that information there with your backend, right? So that was back-end development, and front-end development was making stuff pretty, right? And so if you were like what is called, if you know both front end and back end, is you're a full stack developer, right? Um, that's Full Stack Academy. That's why it's called that, right? Um, and so what that used to mean, like the languages that were available for the back end were stuff like Ruby, Python, um, Perl, C Sharp. Let's see, like going back further than that, I'm not sure. I mean, you can make a backend with like C++ too. Uh, Bloomberg's backends are with C++. But yeah, so if you were a backend developer, you knew one of those languages, right? And if you were a front end developer, you knew JavaScript, right? And if you were a full stack developer, that meant that you split your brain between knowing JavaScript and knowing like some other language, like Python, right? And so you were probably, if you were a full stack developer, you were probably not as good as a front end developer at the front end or a back end developer as the back end. So you kind of just were like, like a worse developer that could do both things, right? Because you were having to split your effort, right? But what Node means is if you can use JavaScript on the back end and you can use it on the front end, you can become the master of one language, JavaScript, and then you can just like focus, like you can develop JavaScript as your skill, and with that alone, you can do both. So it really redefined what it meant to be a full stack developer. And so Node was revolution number 3. The 4th revolution was actually doing client-side rich apps, which was really popularized with Angular. And then React has kind of like come along and knocked Angular aside. But Angular 1 was really the thing and what that was a revolution on the front end, where it was like all of a sudden. So I don't want to go too much into this now because we're going to go into it a lot later. But like you can see these sites or Stack Overflow right here. Every time I click on one of these links, it's like reloading the whole website, right? Like, and you can tell because the whole thing flashes, right? So let's go to, let's see, what's like a modern website? What's like a site that you guys think of when you think of like a modern website? Evernote, okay. So I don't know what either of these things use, but I mean let's just kind of take a guess, right?
Airbnb.
Yeah, Airbnb is probably one. So let's check out what happens. Okay, so no, this doesn't do it. Yeah. So let's see. So basically, you can see that like the whole page is like reloading every time you do anything, right? So let's see. What about Medium? They're a cool site, right? So check this out, right? So do you guys notice a difference between what's happening here on Stack Overflow when we click around and if we're on Medium and we click between these links? That's correct, right? So only the part of the page that's changing, which is down here, is reloading, right? As opposed to here, where it's like every time you click something, the whole page reloads, right? Which you got to imagine is kind of inefficient, right? Because like 80% of this page is the same, right? Yeah, and that's right. It was inefficient, and so basically, but the problem was that basically there was no easy way to kind of manage like there's a ton of information on this page, right? Like there's a lot of stuff to keep track of. You know, I can be logged in, I can have a profile, I can like there's like comments on these things. There's little hearts on them too. And then you know, if I hover my mouse over here, we see all this. You know, this guy's being followed. So there's all of these things to keep track of, right? And basically, jQuery, you know, made JavaScript usable on the front end, but it really did not make doing something like what Medium is doing something that was at all like it was very hard to do that. And so that was kind of basically making an easy way for you to manage your application in the front end was like what Angular did. And so let me get a bit more specific than that. So like the way that Angular that jQuery works is what's called imperative, and it's kind of like you know, what if I was to tell you don't actually do this, but what if I was to tell you to turn off your computer, right? So one way I could tell you to do that is to be like, all right, take your right hand, stick out your index finger, then move it over in front of you 1,000 pixels and over to the right to the power button, and then move it down and push that power button, and then lift it back up. And so now the computer's off, right? Like I didn't write that in the code, but like that's what the result of all that is, right? And maybe I could write a function that's like turn computer off, and then run that, and then it's gonna, you know, like tell you to move your finger around and turn off the computer. But the thing is, you're not like that's like it would be a lot nicer if I could just have something saved, which was like computer state, right? Like the current condition of the computer, and it had a property on that could be true or false, and then I could just flip that property to false, and something else would carry that out for me. So let me say, let's go back to this, right? So, because I think I just explained that badly. So I'm telling you to turn off your computer. I say move your finger over here and then push down, lift up, right? So that's one way I could tell you to turn off your computer, right? Another way I could tell you is I could just say turn off your computer, right? And you already know how to do that. And you know how to do that, you know, with your particular computer, you probably know how to do that better than I do, right? So what Angular and React do is they let you do something that's called, so me telling you to move your finger over, push down, push up, that's the imperative thing, right? Like I'm giving you literally like a complete to-do list, right? The Angular and React way, though, is to just say, I want to turn off the computer, and then you go do it, right? And so the Angular and React way of, you know, handling, like, switching out, like, to bring this into a website, right? Like, the jQuery way of handling switching between these tabs would be to say, take all of these things down here and delete them, right? And then look at what should be over here. Maybe I've got that saved somewhere like in memory or database, whatever. And then I would literally have to like write code that would like create element, right? Or what do we do for this? It's like document dot create element, right? I would have to like, I mean, you could do it slightly nicer with jQuery, but I would actually have to like, like create these things one at a time in here, right? And that would suck, right? And you could imagine if I've got my app built like a friggin' like cookbook, like it's like a to-do list, right? You know, me like switching between these two things is gonna just be a really hard thing to manage. Whereas if I could just say, like, hey, here's a list of items right here. Replace that list with the stuff that I load over here, right? That is a much better developer experience. And that'll make much more sense when we actually like kind of get to the code. But yeah, so that was the fourth JavaScript revolution. And here we are today. Yeah. And so what it means, right? Basically, like with these client-side applications, right? Which is what Medium is here, where it's like you're moving around and you're able to only reload the parts of the page that you need. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But basically, what it means is that you're doing a lot of the logic that used to be handled on the back end is now done on the front end, right? Because over here in in Stack Overflow, when you click between these different tabs and the whole page reloads, I am setting what goes into this page on the server and then sending it over, right? Whereas in Medium, I send over one thing initially, right? And from that point on, the JavaScript takes over and handles updating my site, right? And they're probably using either React or Angular here, I would guess. It's going to be kind of hard to tell because it just is. One kind of telltale sign for Angular is you'll see like NG all over the place. And given that I'm not seeing that, I'm gonna guess that they are using React. And they're pretty modern sites, so like chances are that's true. So because Angular 1 is not something that people build new websites in, basically. Like if it's gonna exist, until like the human race is extinct. But it's not something people make new sites with, right? So anyways, so that is kind of the story of JavaScript, how we got to now, right? So let's go to the repo, right? That I sent over to you guys. But before we go there, actually, let's just go into our terminal, right? Are you guys all in your terminals? All right, so write the word node, right? And now say console.log hello, right? Press enter, right? So now go back to your browser and go into your console tab in your DevTools, right? You can open DevTools by Command-Option-I, right? So now do console.log hello here. So as you'll see, these things look quite similar, right? And that's because, in the case of Chrome, it's literally running on the same engine, right? So Node is running JavaScript for us on the server side, right? Now to get out of this Node thing, you have to press Control-C twice. But so you could imagine, like when you're like running a website, right? like or no, when you're visiting a website, right? There's not a guy that's like got Node in his terminal right here, and he's like send back this, right? Like you make a request, and he's like send back this, send back this, send back this, right? Like that's not going on, right? And you can also imagine like it would be really hard for you to like write a whole like app like in this little terminal window. So what happens is your JavaScript gets saved in files, which Node can then run, right? So you guys inside the repo? All right. So cd into O1 Node, right? And now look at what O1 Node, what's inside of it. You can look at the, you've probably got this project open in Atom, right? So take a look at what's going on in here, right? So there's this thing that's happening. It says import, right? And it says import that exported object from, and then it gives this file path, right? That says other file, right? And then it says console log that exported object, right? So let's see if this works. Okay, so it's running into problems because of that import thing. That's kind of a new thing. Let's see if that works now. So okay, so for the sake of this, I'm going to do this. And I'll explain what's going on here in a second. But so, like, you can kind of imagine, so now, did you guys make this change, what I just did? That's it. Let me know when you guys are done, because I don't want someone to miss this. Yep.
Is this like my rotator is giving me all these weird errors? Okay. All right.
There's a chance that that's because, I think I might know what that is. I think you can very likely get those to go away. Like, I can't guarantee this will make it go away because you could have all sorts of funky stuff going on in your thing, right? But do cd and go back to just Node and Mongo, right? In your terminal. You guys should probably do this too. And then just do npm install, right?
So I did that earlier.
Yeah, I see you did.
Breaking changes with everything.
Okay.
I started looking it up and I was like, oh, that sucks. Apparently that says like, oh,
Okay. Well, this is that warning, right? That you're seeing, right? But it seems to be still working for me. I mean, I did this, I was running this yesterday, right? But so npm install, and I'll explain a bit about that in a minute. But yeah, so that you might have to close and reopen your linter. I mean your Atom, sadly. But I think that after you do npm install, that'll work. But so has everyone changed their code to do this? Y'all have, right?
You have to change the other file as well. It's exported.
That's right. Yeah. So we got to come over here now and say module.exports equals this. Yeah. So the problem that we ran into there is that I'm using basically ES6 or like the kind of new version of JavaScript. and I need to use this tool, Babel, in order to be able to run it. And what Babel does is it turns the new code into old code that Node can handle, right? Yeah. So
You're kind of like this. They're both
I will. Yeah. But so you guys got this? All right. So now you've done your npm install. So cd back into O1 node, right? And then just run node index. Let me know if you got what I got right there. What does it say? Well, Sam, would you mind opening the
So it actually minus the
We need to change.
Okay, here's where you are. You said that. That should work. Did you change this over here? That's right. Let's see. Ah, yeah. Wait. Oh, okay. Oh, you didn't save it. You gotta save this. Yeah, no, it's easy. So you want to do a victory enter? Yeah. What's going on? Okay. Here's the syntax there. Oh yeah. Yeah, I know what you gotta do. It's this one. Gotcha.
Oh, we're ready.
Snapchat, right? Okay. I think you gotta do the same thing here. Yeah. So here you go. So yeah, and that should work. Yeah. So so that what we did is we converted it back to the old way, and so now it works, right? No? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So what's going on here, right? So we're doing this thing, well, you guys could probably have like a pretty good idea of what's happening, but I mean, someone want to explain? I know your names. Jamie.
So you're setting a constant variable called that exploited object,
Uh-huh.
and you're requiring a file.
Yeah.
So it's-
What is required to do that?
So it's like importing from that other file, .js,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're logging out what your what that variable is importing, which is that exploited object, or object.
Yeah. So can I call this whatever I want? That's right. And how do I determine inside of other file what will get exported from it?
So when you do the module.exports, that's what you're allowing to do.
Yeah. So like when I do require from another file on other file, right? Like on sorry for the using name, but for the file I currently have up here, which is called other file.js, setting module.exports says when another file requires this file, or does import if we're using Babel, the thing that I was doing originally, then this is what will get brought in, right? And like I said, you would say export default if you wanted the same behavior but with the new JavaScript. So, anyways, so that's what's going on. And so, because the thing is, right, like you actually, to run a server-side application, right, like it can get, like there can be a whole lot going on, right? So like you really can't just have all of your code be in one file, right? And believe it or not, that actually used to be kind of the norm for JavaScript. Um, excuse me. So like what people used to do is just basically have they'd have, this jQuery code that was running on their website, right? And it would just be in one massive file, right? And so it would just be, like people used to remember like line numbers. Like you'd be like, oh yeah, go to line number like 353, right? Because it was just, like this thing was like a scroll, like it was, and so that's how it used to work. Because the thing is, it's less efficient to bring in like multiple files into your website than it is to just bring in one. And it's like easier, kind of like if you're trying to do something in one file, and then you want to do something else based on the first thing you did, it's kind of easier to do that in one file. So basically, there used to be these monolithic files, right, of JavaScript, right? So Node, though, I mean, you're doing stuff on the server, and like there can be like tons of stuff that you're doing. So if Node was going to be a real project, this guy Ryan Dahl had to figure out a way to make it so you could break your projects into multiple files really easily. And so what he used is this thing that's called just require system. It says at one point based on this thing called CommonJS, but you don't really need to know about that. But so originally when he made Node, he had this require system, and he made files able to access other files in the way that you're seeing right now, right? And then ES6 kind of like changes it a bit, but it's the same idea. And one thing to let you know, by the way, this is kind of something that's like nice of Node, like the way that it did this with require, like in .NET projects, right? Until just recently. So .NET is another backend. It's a backend framework that uses C#. And until just recently, when you made a .NET project, and these are pretty common. Like the previous place that I worked, actually, they had a lot of .NET developers. When you made a project with .NET using C#, you actually had to have a file that like listed every single file that you were using in your project, right? It was just like a map to like all of the files that you were using, like inside directories and stuff like that. And so Node, kind of gave this much more intuitive, the way you would expect it to be with this whole require system, and it was pretty cool. But yeah, and so you can get the idea. So you're able to store your code in files, and then you can run it by doing Node like this, right? And yeah, so that's Node. You're running JavaScript on the server side, right? So it's possible though that you might actually want to make a server out of your with Node, right? And so what's a server? It's a program that's running that's like listening for requests, right? Or listening, like think of it as it's like listening for visitors, right? Like it's like it unlocks the door on your house and like lets people come in, as they want. And that's maybe a bad metaphor, but so like there's let's see. Trying to think of like what's so well. First off, has anyone heard of Express? Yeah. Someone want to take a stab at like explaining what it does?
It's a framework for setting up all Yes, setting up, starting all the necessary files to run in your field server.
Well,
No, not
so it's how you start a server, right? And I can imagine, I can see why you would think that, right? But so what Express does, right? So if we move over into this Express folder, right? So first, let's take one step back and kind of break down what's going on in this folder, right? This Express folder, right? So first, let's look at package.json, right? So in here, we've got this thing. So package.json is kind of the thing that npm is relying on, right? Like npm saves stuff into package.json. Like when you install something, it saves stuff into package.json. And then you're able to like configure commands, and I'll explain that in a second. But it's like so you see the scripts thing right here. What this is doing is it's saying when I say npm start, run this, right? So it's equivalent to if I had just said nodemon and then /, right? But basically, npm is going to look in this package.json when you do npm install, right? And it's going to like be able to know, like read basically these things that you're using that you have saved in here, and it can go get them and bring them to your computer, right? And bring them to your project. And the reason that this is desirable, right? So like you could think, right? Like I'm going to use jQuery. I'm going to use React. Why don't I just go get the source code and keep that in my project, right? And that would make your project's file size really big. And so like if someone else was going to start working on your project too, getting the project to them might take a long time. But it would also if you wouldn't be able to update to the next version of React very easily, right? So npm Node Package Manager both has this library, and you would also have to go find React. And so npm has kind of this library of packages, right? Which are just open source projects, right? And then it manages those packages, the version for you with this package.json file. And it also lets you not ship around like the whole, downloaded dependencies, right? Which is all of React's source code. Instead, you just send around this package.json file, and then someone can just do npm install and go get them themselves. And when they're gotten, they're stored into this node modules folder, right? And so you can see, take a look here, right? This node modules folder is insanely huge, and this is a tiny example app, right? So you can imagine how giant this gets on something real, right? But so for this particular project, there's a package.json inside of this O2 Express folder, right? And then there's one outside of it in just Node and Mongo. The reason for that is because we had to install some stuff to allow linting, right? Which is giving you all your lovely error messages. But so let's go back to the terminal, and to get started, let's cd into O2 Express, right? And do npm install. Right? Yeah, okay. And so that'll take a second. But so now we've covered the package.json, right? Except really the script thing basically what this is doing is just allowing us to do just npm start, right? Oh, one thing you'll need to do too, npm install -g nodemon in case you haven't done this before. Let me do that real quick. So what -g does is it installs globally, so it allows you to, in most cases, use it as kind of a command. But you don't really need to know about that right now.
In an arrow.
No, it's still installed.
What's going on?
Before. Just going on like.
Why is this called dash Do you not have those?
You said you ran the
Yeah,
That's right, yeah, so that must have been somewhere, right? Yeah. Is this working for everyone? Does the install work successfully?
No, I'm getting some errors.
Okay. Alright, okay. Alright, I have some guesses as to why this is happening, but for the sake of just getting this going, let's say screw the global thing, which would let you use it like in any project. And then let's just say npm install -- save nodemon. Yeah, you got to do that in use.
Actually, I had to take one other one and then the global install did work for me.
So for some reason this isn't showing as like a good detail. So I'm not sure why that is. If you know that, do it. Okay. Alright, something kind of messed up with it. This one might be a little bit to figure out. Yeah, do you want to kind of sit on with someone? But and then we can figure it out after class meeting?
How do you actually, well, maybe just don't think so.
Well, you need to have, so like, before you do npm install, all of the libraries which your project is depending on are not actually in your project, right? Like, you don't have them downloaded, right? And so nothing will work.
What about what was the
Well, it's not gonna, you've got something that's wrong with npm itself. And so that's something that's kind of like a system-wide issue, right?
so not this file?
It's not something related to, specific, I mean, you can do that, right? It is, yeah, like, no matter what you do, you're gonna get this error. And I'm not sure why. One thing that I could imagine is code before, but I really I can't like you know, spend much time trying to remember it, so I'm not class, right? So yeah, if you could sit on stuff like with someone, or not to
Yeah.
the ideal. It's really like go beyond that. So like I don't want to make sure it's So does this work for everyone else? All right. That's right. That's right. It's kind of sassy. Yeah. Yeah. So all right. So basically, what we've done here is npm has read through our dependencies and gone and gotten them for us, right? And brought them down, and so we've like downloaded like Babel Core, Babel Preset, ES 2016, all this stuff, right? And then when we do npm start, we've said what we do when we do that is we say nodemon, and then we do /. And so one thing we did before, we did, it was like, we did node, and then we said node index JS, right? Like, this // seems a little bit weird. Does anyone know, like, why this is working? Because this is just kind of giving, what it's doing is actually it's saying the current directory, right? Because that's, if you were in the terminal and you said, like, cd // something, right? Like it's referring to the current directory actually. So does anyone have an idea why this works? Yeah, so that's right. So what happens is if you select a directory with node, right? Like if you run node on a directory, and it actually works with require as well, right? So if you were to say in here, you were to say require // right? Or import, with the new syntax, right? It would, like, you would be selecting this directory, 01 _ node, right? But what happens is it will default, like if you select a directory, what happens is it will default to the index.js file inside that directory, right? So back in package.json, when we're saying nodemon /, what we're doing is we're running this thing nodemon on index.js right here, right? And so real quick, so we're running node. What is nodemon? Does anyone know? Well, so Node kind of does that, right? What nodemon does is it's this really convenient development tool. So check this out. So it says nodemon's running over here, right? And so I'm going to add a little comment right here, right? Now go back over here. Look what happened. It said restarting due to changes, right? And so when you're running node normally, like let's try this, right? If I do just node, right? And now I change something. Node is not going to restart, right? So like, let's say, you might have seen that, this app somehow yields hello sucka in the browser. And let's say I changed that text to be like, what up, sucka, right? So node, in order to, if I'm just running the regular command node, in order to get that change to take place, I need to stop node and then run it again, right? And nodemon, so nodemon is a development tool that will like restart Node every time you make a change, right? So it's basically doing that restarting thing that I would have to do myself otherwise for me. So it's really convenient, right? Because you want, like, every time you make a change, you want that change to be immediately reflected, right? So that's what NodeRun does. So we do npm start, right? And so now it says app up and running at HTTP localhost 3000, right? So now let's go to localhost 3000 in our browser, right? If you go there, you know it's saying hello sucker, right? Right. And the problem is you can always see what I'm doing. Yeah. So let's try going to localhost 3000/wait. Right? Try doing that. So kind of it's taking a while, right? But then it comes back. And now let's go look at our console, right? It waited 5 seconds. Okay. So you can see what's happening here is there's two different things that are happening when you just go to localhost 3000, and then when you go to localhost 3000/wait, right? And so let's try something else. Let's try localhost 3000/wait for 3. Right? If you look, it says I waited for 3 seconds, right? So there's different things that are happening when we go to these different routes, right? And so this is what Express does. Express handles basically different things happening when you go to different routes, right? And routes being, you know, the thing after the slash, right? Like your website name and then slash, right? And so Express is kind of like, it's like you know, like if you're on in your server, it's kind of like a traffic guy, right? Like it's saying, you know, like, okay, wait for came in, go this way, right? Okay, wait came in, go this way. Okay, just slash, like the index route, they sometimes call it, came in, okay, go this way, right? So it's doing that for you, right? The other thing that Express is doing is it's doing, and this is a bit more confusing, but I think you guys can handle it. So it's doing this thing. It's what's called a middleware manager, right? And what middleware is like when a request comes in, right? So like that traffic guy, right? Let's say that traffic guy, you know, that's saying, you know, oh, wait for happened, oh, wait happened, right? Let's say he's pretty smart, right? So he is not only going to say, you know, like go this way, go that way. He's actually also going to say, oh, wait for happened, right? And that began with the word wait. So how about we wait for 1 second, and then we go see what wait for wants it to also do, right? Or you could actually say, so like, you know, over here on the client side, like we're sending back hello sucker no matter what, right? So if that's happening, right, it's like the same thing is happening to the end user no matter what, right? Like the same thing is getting sent back, right? So think about this. Wait for and wait are probably middleware themselves, right? Like what's happening is that traffic guy that's real smart is saying, all right, so wait came in. So now before going off and doing this other thing that always happens when you go to just slash, right? First, let's do this weighting, right? And then go there, right? So you could imagine, right? Kind of abstracting this concept out. Like, what if when a request comes into your website, you want to check if, like, so if I go to Facebook, right? Hopefully there's like nothing embarrassing, right? So I'm logged into Facebook. How did that happen, right? I didn't just log in just now, right? How did Facebook know I was logged in, right? So there's something that Facebook is likely doing, like going back to our traffic guy, he is probably, a request comes into Facebook, and the smart traffic guy says, all right, do these steps here to check if that request came in is actually from a guy that's already logged in, right? And if it is, then do this, right? So that's probably what's happening there. So that's kind of like a real example, right? Because like waiting is not a real example. People don't want websites to be slower, right? But so anyways, so that's what the concept of middleware is, right? Is kind of this thing that happens in between a request coming in and a response gets setting back. In between, or you could say in the middle, right? And so now let's look at this code again. So what we're doing, we're saying npm start, right? And we can kind of ignore that. There's also this babelrc file. This is just configuring. Like we want to allow like the new JavaScript to work, and this is just something to configure that working, right? But over here in index.js, like this is what's getting run when we do npm start, right? So we're doing this thing, require Babel core register. What this does is it says, all right, this file right here, like it actually is being run in old JavaScript land, but running Babel core register will mean every file afterwards will be run in new JavaScript land, right? And so then our next thing that we run is server, right? And so, wait a minute, server is a folder. So what file do we think this runs? Right? Doing require /server.
I'm guessing any file in the directory.
Well, it can't be any file.
Or all
It's gotta be a
files
specific
no?
file. If it ran all the files, what order would it do it? It's kind of it's not what's going to happen.
You actually set its own server file.
Yeah,
That's
that's right. But even if there were other files, the index.js is what would always be run, right? By requiring a directory. Right? But so what we're doing is we're saying transform all files after this file right here, like allow new JavaScript to happen, right? And then we're saying run index.js inside a server, right? So then over here, we're inside of index.js, right? And this is where our app is actually like, this is the only other file in this folder, right? So this must be where all the magic is happening, right? And so you can see now I'm able to do this whole import thing that didn't work when we were in the node folder, and that's because we weren't doing the Babel register thing, right? Yeah, so I'm able to bring these things in, right? This might look like, kind of intimidating, right? But let's step through it, right? So basically, like we're bringing in Express, right? And then we're bringing in this thing called a logger, right? What a logger is just the thing like you see over here in your terminal. It's saying request and then response, right? That doesn't happen on its own. A program has to run to make that happen, right? And that's a logger, right? And you can imagine, if this is a live website, maybe you want to send all of the stuff that's coming out here. Like in case there's errors, you want to send that into like a log file, right? So you can look at it later, right? But so anyways, so that's a logger, right? And then what you have to do, basically, you're able to like configure Express if you wanted to, right? So because of that, you have to run Express as a function to produce an app that you can then work with, right? And then what we're doing is we're letting the logger, like we're basically, like if you think about it, right, like that thing that's showing off these messages in the console, right? That is a middleware itself, right? Like that's standing in between requests and responses, right? To log this out to your console, right? And so we're hooking that onto app, right? And that becomes a middleware, right? And then it gets interesting. Here we're saying app.get/wait, right? And then we've got this function, and we're getting these arguments fed to that function. We're getting a request, a response, and next, right? And you can see, remember when we did just /wait, it showed in the console, I waited 5 seconds, right? And so that's clearly happening here. It says set timeout, right? And then it says 5,000, which is 5 milliseconds, right? And then the function that's being run is console.log, I waited 5 seconds, and then next, right? And so what's happening here is basically the way these middlewares work, Express is like, what's going to happen is a request comes in and like you've got a list of routes, right? Like wait for, and you've got this list of routes. Express is going to kind of go down each one, and then every time one matches, it's going to go inside of it, right? And if like the one that it matches includes a response, which would look something like res.send, right? Then it's going to stop. It's not going to run anymore, right? But, however, if it doesn't include a response, right, we have to say, all right, I want you to do something when we go to this route, but then I want you to continue on, right? Because that's what our smart traffic guy does, right? He maybe checks if there's a user logged in, and then he says, go on, right? And that's handled with next, right? So then we run next whenever we're done doing what we're trying to do here, right? So we wait for 5 seconds, then we say next, right? And then here's another route, which allows us to specify the time to wait, right? Could someone maybe, I'm talking too much. Could someone maybe like talk about this right here? Like, what do you step through this and say what you think is happening? Awesome.
Okay. So like we did earlier with the wait for 3.
Mm-hmm.
The request parameter 3, it's getting known as a variable, or it's known as request, or request.parent.time.
So how do you think that might be happening, right? like before we just did /wait, right? And that hit right there, right? Here we've got /:time, right? So why is this not, why doesn't this, like, why isn't this, what happens when you do that?
Um, it would probably consider that to be an entry of 0, and 0 times 1,000 is 0.
Well, it's not quite true.
Or 0 error.
So, it's a perfectly reasonable guess. I mean, you're just, guessing at this, right? And guessing is great. But so basically, when we've got this route set up in Express, if we want a value to be dynamic, right? This is what we do: is we put a colon in front, right? And then basically, what's going to happen is when a route comes in, this will be like a variable that we can access on the rec.params object, right? And you could do more than one of these. You could say, right? And now there's the variables rec.params.silly and rec.params.me, right? And we'll hit this. So now we will no longer hit this if we just do this, right? Let's see. Oh, wait, I'm pretty sure we won't. Okay. Am I going crazy? Yes, I guess that's what must be happening. I mean, this is a weird example, right? Like I never would do something like this. But I guess if you have like a bunch of variables here, then it's exactly like what you're saying, like they can just be nothing. What happens if we do this? Right, so it restarted, right? See what happens here. Yeah, so it's not waiting at all now, right? So now we know it's not hitting. All right, so we're not like I'm wrong, but I'm not like crazy wrong. But what if we do this, right? Okay. I frankly would have thought that this would have hit because I would have thought these could be empty now. But I guess maybe not. So, but let's do this. All right, now it's going to wait for 10 seconds, right? So it's real slow, so I'm pretty sure it's working, right? Sure enough, right? So this is how we're specifying the route, and I'll look into actually why this was working, because that actually surprises me. But so anyways, so is this kind of making sense, right? So like, if we're looking at a real example, like our Stack Overflow buddies, right? Let's go back to them, right? So check this out, right? Do you think they have hard-coded on their back end, when like someone goes to /questions/19176926, send back this? They probably don't, right? They've probably got something that's the equivalent of post ID, right? And that's what this is doing, right? Yeah. So, anyways, so basically the way that this Express is going to work is it's going to run down until it hits something that sends a response, right? Wait, let me get back the time thing here, right? and then every time you hit, something that's not sending a response, you have to run next to let it move on, right? So it is moving like vertically, right? Like it's like it matters what order you put this in, right? Like if you were to be, sending a response, let's say we had wait and then wait/time, right? If you were to send a response in here, right, instead of doing next, you would never get to down here, right? So order does actually matter here. So, yeah. So anyway, so now we've got a good old throwback, right? So this is to demonstrate. So take a look at this, right? Down here, beneath this hit me, we've got app.get, and then it's saying /star. What do you guys think this might mean? That's right. Yeah. So that's why all of the, when we say /wait, like we're still sending back hello sucka, because what's happening is we're going to here, and then, it's waiting 5 seconds, and then console locking, I waited 5 seconds, then going next, and then it's going down, it's like, all right, what's the next thing that I hit, right? Not hit is a loaded term in this context, but, and then, it's saying, all right, here's this route, which is catching everything, right? All right, I hit that because I'm part of everything. /wait is, one thing that is part of everything. And then it says send a response, hello sucka, right? So this is kind of what you would call like a catch-all route, right? It says it right there, right? So this is like, if it doesn't hit anything else that sends a response, then it'll hit this, right? And so you could have, you guys have probably seen like sometimes like you'll go to a page and it'll be like, 404, like this is not found, right? Like, but it won't just be like an ugly 404 that kind of comes from your browser. Like it'll be like, if you go to Airbnb and then you go to like if we, let's do this, right? We go to Airbnb and so let's check out, oh yeah, I like afford my apartment by like doing Airbnb and like and having random motherfuckers in my house every night. But yeah, and a wife that complains about it a lot. But we're stopping that soon. But so, anyways, yeah. So check that out, right? So like, this has got to be something that's like root, right? Because you're like it's feeding in this number, right? And so now I'm just like typing in like a ridiculous number, right? Like let's try guessing one. I wonder if this will be a real house. It's not. And it just redirected me back to here, right? So that is their catch-all route, right? Like if you try to go to an ID that doesn't exist, then it just sends you to their homepage, right? So that is the equivalent of our hello sucka, but theirs looks a little bit nicer. But so similarly, right? Like if it looks like if we go to hit me right here, like we might actually get back a response other than hello sucka. Well, yeah. So you see what's going on? Yeah. Yeah, and then down at the bottom here, app.listen. This is what's actually saying, we're at localhost 3000, right? This is what makes our app run at localhost 3000. And so does anyone have an idea, so we're running our app at localhost 3000. This is what's, saying like start running it, right? And it says run it at 3000. Does anyone know what the 3000 is in this case? That's right, right? So also, well, it's not up now, but what if I do this? How did that work? so what this is right here, this is called an IP address, right? Are you guys on WeWork or WeWork Guest as a Wi-Fi?
Come on, guys.
You would.
You're on the real WeWork. All right.
Share
Okay.
that password.
So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So well, sorry, actually going. But so check it out. In my like system preferences, where it's like showing my like in network and system preferences, right? It's showing connected. Wi-Fi is connected to WeWork and has the IP address 10.18.106.25. So I'm going to select this to you, Katie. Right? Oh shit. Let me do one thing really quick. Yeah. So, yeah, I won't even go into that. All right. So you you have you've gotten that in Slack, right?
Yes,
So can you type that into your URL, or copy and paste it into your URL? And then do :3000. It says hello, sucker.
it does.
Yeah. Right. Katie as my witness. Yeah. Now try doing /hit me. Get mad at it. Yeah. So what she's doing right now is actually accessing the website that's running on my computer, right? Remember, servers are just computers that are running websites, like listening for website requests. My computer is one right now, right? And it works for me with localhost, but Katie can actually access it through my IP address and this port combination, right? But so basically, it doesn't, whatever this number is, 10.18.106.25. It doesn't really, roll off the tongue like Google.com does. So what there is this whole DNS system, domain name service system, which basically takes human readable domains, right, like Google.com, and converts them into these 4-number series, which is an IP address, right?
And then are you getting the console logs from the request that she's putting in?
Yeah. Well, you can see it in the logger. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no console logs at those routes. If
Yeah.
she went to wait, you want to go to wait? Actually, yeah. Let's do this. So you go to wait, like /wait. Yeah. See. Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah. Right. So she is accessing, the website that's running on my computer, right? Yeah, and so this colon thing, this port thing, right? You don't usually put that when you are accessing a website, right? Like you don't go to google.com :something, right? And so that's because there's these agreed upon ports, these agreed upon port numbers, right? So for HTTP, let's go to what's the site that'll work with HTTP? Oh, I happen to know one because I made it. At least I hope it will work with HTTP. Motherfucker, what's going on? I don't know why I did that. I really don't. I'm using like a free Heroku server for this, so maybe that's something to do with that. But anyway, so I made the site, right? So this, you know, the HTTP has disappeared from in front of it, but it's there, right? I mean, right? But what if I do this, right? 80, right? Colon 80. That 80 disappears, right? And that's because HTTP is actually served over port 80. That's like the communication, like the universally agreed upon port for HTTP communication. If you want to specify something else, like for example 3000, you have to put that colon, right? And so Google has got something different. It's got HTTPS, right, which is HTTP secure, right? And basically any site that you log into should be using HTTPS, or else evil guys can like get your password much more easily. Yeah, so the agreed upon port for that is 443, right? And so if you put colon 443 here, press enter, it disappears because it was actually already there. Yeah, so that's a little lesson in there. Let's try that. Yeah, right. Well, let's use, I don't know, 3000. That's what we're using on the other one, right? I actually have no idea what's going to happen. I guess like nothing forever. Yeah, I think it's just basically it's not hitting anything, like it's not like unlike routes, right? Where you can be like, if someone goes to this route, then like send them over here, right? Like they would literally need something to be listening on port 3000. Like they would need another instance of Google.com, or just any application that says redirect to just Google.com port 443. They would need that running on port 3000 to accept this. So there probably isn't one, and that's probably why it's taking like a million years of doing nothing. But yeah, so that's on ports and IP addresses. Yeah. By the way, Katie, Allison, you kind of missed it. But basically, like this is an IP address here, and like there's this thing called domain name service, which converts any friendly website that you go to, which is like Google.com or JuliaEstrada.com, into those 4 numbers, right? And if you wanted to actually run a real website out of your computer, you could do that. But the thing is, my computer's IP address will change every time I like turn off and on my Wi-Fi router. And so if I wanted to actually run a website out of my computer, I would need to like call up my internet service provider and ask for what's called a static IP, so it would never change. And then I would need to go buy a domain, and then I would need to make that domain point to my IP address, which is not ever going to change. And then I would be running a website out of my computer. But every time I came over here and did this, people would no longer be able to visit my website. I mean, you can actually run a website out of your computer. You could probably do it. A guy that ran like Silk Road, that place you could like buy drugs on the dark web. Like, sure, he ran a website himself somehow. Yeah, that's actually. You guys want to know a little bit about that, like dark web, like weird shit. So if you really want to know a lot about that, you should watch the show Mr. Robot. It's just a really good show, but also like all of the stuff, a lot of Hollywood stuff like glosses over the tech part, right? Like they just like freak out about something tech and just say jargon, right? But that show actually is like spot on with like every single thing. And you can Google it, yeah. But so anyways, so basically the way that deep web is actually just sites that you can't Google. So like that's not actually that big of a deal. Like there's a lot of things. An example of something you can't Google is like a Google search, like if you said blah, right? Like this has got, this query parameter right here, right? And like basically, this particular page of Google, anything, pretty much anything that's got that dynamic route thing going on, right? Where you can like feed in an ID. That's not quite true. I shouldn't say that. But basically, a lot of the what's called the deep web is just hidden internet, and it's not hidden because it's secret. It's just hidden because it's like, I don't know, boring. Like it's just like a search result here. Like it would just kind of clog other search engines if you could search for other search engines as search results, right? Like if that popped up when you typed in blah in Yahoo, like the search result page for blah in Google. Right? So this is part of the deep web, right? But there's so deep web is unsearchable internet. But you can imagine like you could put unsearchable internet. You could have unsearchable internet stuff that's a little more devious than googling blah. And so the way that you kind of pull that off, I mean, making it ungoogleable isn't that tough, but you want to make yourself untrackable, right? And there's this thing that's called, the way that that's frequently done is with this cool tool called onion routing. And basically what it does is it makes it so you can serve a website just like I'm serving one now, but it's more like what happens is you plug into a network. And you're actually serving a website. You don't know what website you're serving, right? You're serving someone else's website, and someone else is serving yours. And so what that's doing is like it's like scrambling the location that your website is getting served from. So it's really hard to figure out where it's coming from, right?
Is that where you throw that
Yeah, like that's like the onion has like its logo. And then like a lot of Tor sites will be like .onion. That's just paying homage to the onion routing. I believe at least, right? Like I don't know that much about this. This isn't my job. And then Tor is just it's kind of the corresponding client where it's like the requests that you make will get like routed through a bunch of what's called proxies. So it'll basically look like kind of like other people are making them. I'm actually less clear about that side, but basically it'll be hard to tell what you're browsing when you're using Tor, and so like they're kind of like them together makes like secret internet, right? Like you can't tell who's serving it, and then you can't tell who's browsing it, right? So that is that. So anyways, I think you guys get the idea of Express, right? Yeah.
So just these parameters.
By the way, please ask questions anytime, like just interrupt me, whatever. Yeah.
So these parameters that we pass into the anonymous functions, so rec, res, and next.
By the way, they're anonymous. Sam's right. That's because they just don't have a name like that. Yeah. But yeah.
So those are like built-in objects that already have properties, right? Or at least it looks like.
Oh, like how is Express working with that, right?
So like.
Oh, you're saying rec and res, like these things that you're getting access to with Express, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the request is like the request object, the response is like the response object, and next is that function that you say go to the next thing with. So request and rec and res the rec has kind of stuff like the user's cookies and stuff like that, which by the way, cookies are what you use to tell if someone's logged in already. It's got information that's coming in about the request, and then the response res is like this thing that has like a bunch of methods relating to sending out the response, right? But yeah, they're objects that Express is making for you, right?
Yeah. So here we just use like rec.params.time, but there's a lot of properties that object would have that we could use.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, not more things on params, but on rec itself, yeah, there's like a ton, right? Like you could say, rec dot cookies, and then I think you have to like specify a specific one, like user ID, and like that if there was a cookie called user ID, that would get it, right? But by the way, so to actually, down here, we're doing app.listen, right, with Express. This is just an abstraction on top of something that Node has itself, which is just http.createServer, like 3000, right? And then like a callback. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, that's one thing to really keep in mind is like libraries. I mean, this doesn't always have to be true on the server side. It does always have to be true on the client side. But like JavaScript libraries are just made of JavaScript. Like if we were to read the source code of jQuery and we know JavaScript, we can see what it's doing. So libraries aren't magic, right? And same with Node. Almost all of the libraries for Node are going to be written in JavaScript. And like so Express is written in JavaScript. It's possible to like kind of step out of JavaScript and like do something in like C or something like that if you want it to be really high performance, but only on the server side. But people rarely do that. But so anyways, yeah. So this is the idea with Express. And let me see if there was something else I wanted to say here. Did you have another question, Sam?
Yeah, online for me too. Then is that like jQuery using the selector?
Oh, okay. All right.
Or
Yeah.
is that like JSX?
Yeah. So it's not JSX. Yeah. So I'm used to using like the new JavaScript stuff, and so if like basically it's hard for me to not use it in examples, and I plan to hopefully get that through to you guys anyways. So here I kind of use it by accident. But basically, like, what if I want to put, like I've got a variable, right? And I want to put that in the middle of a string, right? So I want this to be dynamic. I want to be able to say, I waited, and then whatever they gave as time, that amount of seconds, right? What ES6 gives you this new tool to do that you didn't used to have, which is called it's called template strings, but I mean that's not really a helpful name. Like it doesn't say what it's doing. Basically, so normally with strings, what you do is you use these like either single or double quotes, right? If you use this backtick, right, you're saying I'm a template string now, which means if you do this thing right here, right, you're kind of stepping out of the regular string part, and you're able to say something like, remembering our short circuit operators, right, and you can like embed something dynamic. This is not dynamic because true is always true, but you see what I mean? You can embed something dynamic into like what is otherwise a static string, right? And this is the syntax for that. Yeah, it's like backtick and then $ bracket around whatever you want to be dynamic, right? And so this is a variable that we're feeding into the middle of this string. That's why it said I waited 3 seconds, right? Like that's not hard-coded anywhere. I waited 5 seconds is hard-coded up here, but I waited 3 seconds was not, and it came in like this. Yeah. So that's that. So all right. Like any questions there, right? I know it's a lot, but so by all means ask away. Yeah. Anything? Jakar, are you sure you don't want to like look almost someone? I feel bad because
No, I'm alive.
You are? Okay, you guys are okay. Good. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's honestly it's like one of the most painful things, and it's one of the big reasons to use Macs instead of Windows. Is like just to get everyone's configuration in sync. Yeah, because Macs like Steve Jobs is like don't let people configure anything, and So because of that, it's much easier to like have everyone be in sync, you know, if they're using a Mac. But yeah, so all right, on to Mongo, right? So so we talked a little bit, like very briefly, last time about the idea of a database, right? So a database is like I'm sure you guys have, you know, like when people say technical jargon in movies, database is like one of the things they say, right? So I'm sure at least from that, like you've heard the word database before somewhere, right? Does anyone have an idea like what it is? Right?
Storage data.
Okay.
It's like a warehouse and data.
All right. All right. All right. You know too much. I'm gonna ask something else. All right.
It's a database, that is,
Well, you're using an abstraction there, which avoids revealing what you know and don't know.
it, unlike MySQL and those kinds of technologies, it's not,
Not Mongo, just a database in general.
a thing that stores data
Okay.
and lets you query it and
So I just right now I say var equals 7. I just stored a number 7 as blah blah blah. I just stored a number. Why? I mean, I didn't need a database to do that. What's special about a database?
Just communication. It's all to it.
That's true. But why do I need to talk to it? I mean, I just stored 7 right here all by myself.
So
Because you might need to change.
Or use it.
Well, all right. If I need to change it, I'll just say, you know, if whatever is true, then blah 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 equals 2, right?
scalability and accessibility. This program might not be the only thing that needs to know that blah 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 is not too.
Oh.
It might have a lot.
Wait, let's talk on that for 1 second, right? So that's an interesting point. So this program might be sharing data with someone else, right? So we might want to have kind of one single source of truth that everything else can talk to, right? Okay. So what else? Because like this is just changing, you know, as I run code, right? Like I just stored var blah 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 at 7. You know, whatever is true might be true sometimes for some people, but not true for other people that are running this application, right? And so, you know, like the actual code and you know, like the actual code could get like out of sync, right? Like, and let's think about, you know, websites, right? Like I'm doing something totally different over here, right? Like I'm logged in, right? Like I'm clicking over to the home thing, right? And I'm going over here, right? If you're on Facebook, you're doing something totally different, right? But what we want to do is we want to be retrieving information that's like specific to us, which is saved somewhere else, right? But let's talk about saving though, right? Like I mean, right here, didn't I just save 7 as the variable blah blah blah?
Yeah. So.
Well, let's. I want to challenge someone else. Yeah, you're out of the hot seat. The car. What? So, like, what is the difference you think between saving something in a database and saving something just like I just saved blah 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 right here, right? We've got, all right. It's like a single source of truth, right? Like other people can go there, right? But what must be kind of true for that to be true?
For what?
Like for it to be like this source of truth that other people can go to, right, and kind of like get reliably get like accurate information. Like, you know, my buddy Lex, you know, he's like one of the most active people on Facebook I know. All right, he's talking about stuff. But so if you go to Lex's wall, you want to see this too, right? Or maybe you don't. But but so you know, this has got to be like the same experience has to exist for everyone that goes to Lex's wall, right? But so going back to this though, the difference here is like if I like, you know, start up my application like and shut it down, right? Like I'm going to be creating this variable, and then like all of the data that was being stored in my application, right? Like you know, if I come over here, right? Like so you press npm start to like, you know, get this thing started. I don't know if I told you this part, so maybe you haven't done this yet, but like you press Control C to stop, right? Like the actual control, not command. And so, yeah, when I do that, all of the data, all of these variables that I made just get wiped, right? Like they're not existing anywhere anymore, right? And so let's think of like a house, right? This is maybe not the best example, but like people can come in and out of a house, right? But like the walls in that house will be the same for every person that goes in and out of that house, right? The walls are like pretty firmly fixed there; they're saved, right? I don't know if I like that example, but basically, like what you need with the database is something that you can save for later, right? It's going to persist. The persist is the technical term, like persistence, right? But it's going to persist. Like I want something that's going to be there the next time I do npm start, right? Like if I've, you know, made a you know, you can imagine, right? Like you know, if I'm running Facebook, right, and like a user is signed up, right? Like maybe, you know, I'm just storing like as a variable somewhere when they sign up, you know, like in my Express stuff, I'm just storing, you know, new user, and maybe I'm just making like an object, and maybe I'll like, send back that user. But like, you know, like that's a pretty like flaky system. If I like, you know, stop all of my servers, like if they go down, you know, which by the way, servers going down means just like the computer's turned off or something like that. Or like the code broke like on running a computer that's serving a website. That's the server being down. But so if that happens, you know, all my users are wiped, right? So like I need to save that somewhere, right? And so like your actual computer kind of has something similar to a database too. It's the file system, right? So there's data that's like temporary, right? Like where this window is right now on the screen is temporary data, right? But something more permanent is like what files I have saved, right? Like, you know, when you press Command S, right, and save a file, like you know, if I turn off the computer and turn it back on, I don't really care if this window is like where it was before, right? I mean, if it is, great. But you know, if I like, you can imagine if I like, you know, completely like let my laptop run out of batteries, or like completely shut it down and turn it back on, this window will not be open, right? But this is still data that's being, you know, like used, right? Like where this thing is, like that's data, right? Like its position. But what is really important is that when I save something, it is saved, right? Like I really reliably need to be able to do that. So that is like where databases come in, right? They're places that you can reliably save something, right? And they're a single source of truth that you can kind of like go to and expect the same information to come out for everyone, right? Like, you know, I can put a post on Lex's wall, right? And then if he goes to his wall, he'll see that post, right? And that's because, you know, I'm adding data that he's then able to retrieve, right? So yeah. So on to, you know, Mongo specifically. So basically, the first, like at one point, you know, like back in the bad old days, databases weren't really a thing. They actually were like text files, right? Like that were like stored on like somewhere, right? What'd you say?
CSV.
Yeah, or that would be one way to do it, right? But basically, just like every project that you go on to, you got to learn the code that's like existing for that project. Like how are they doing stuff, right? Uh, you used to have to go on and learn how they were doing, like how they did a database too, because it would be different every time, right? Like, and basically, the quote quote database would just be like a text file that they were just writing stuff to, right? And how you accessed data would be different. Like that's in the world where a database isn't really a thing. You just rely on the whole file system saving something, right? Like the same thing that you're doing when you save a file, like you just use that, on your computer that's running a website, right? So that kind of sucks. So what came along was relational databases. If you guys have heard of Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, that was their like flagship product, right? He's like the fifth richest dude in the U.S., I think. And so their flagship product was a relational database, and what it was like this standardized. So SQL is the language you use for relational databases, and it's or SQL. It stands for Structured Query Language. So it was a standardized way to interact with the data that was in, to be able to save data and then retrieve data, right? Like you could use a relational database that was on someone else's project, and you already know how to use it, right? Because relational databases were standardized, right? And the thing that's great is if they're standardized, then you can start to optimize them too, right? And you can imagine it gets much more like everyone ends up using a much better database when everyone's not writing their own, and someone is going and writing a database and making it really good, right? That's what our buddy Larry did. And then so for a long time, that like relational databases dominated. Ones that you'll hear of are MySQL or Postgres, right? Then people had kind of this idea, like there were these problems that were like really hard with relational databases, right? Like they really just sucked to work with. So relational databases are kind of like these like tables. So you could like have like when you guys were in college, or even high school probably, like there were these student ID cards you probably had, and they have like an ID number on them, right? And like, what the fuck is that? Like, you're not using it, right? Like you don't identify as 133445, right? So I guarantee you that somewhere there's a database at your college which is like student ID, right? And then it's like a number, right? And that's one row, and that's one student. That's another one, right? And you can imagine these student IDs are tied to like name, right? And maybe they're also tied to year, grad, right? So you guys have probably, at least I have, gotten a bunch of emails from my school asking me to give them money, right? And those emails will sometimes, or I'll sometimes get, stuff that's like, oh, hey, everyone that graduated in 2011, right? Which I might have graduated. You'll get emails that say that, right? So, do you think that there's someone that's like literally looking up, like they've got like an Excel spreadsheet that's like got every student ever and their information, and some poor soul is like writing emails to each person? Probably not. I mean, that might happen to like the really rich people, but to me it doesn't. And so what's probably happening is there's student IDs that are, have like this field that's got 2011 in it, right? And I happen to be one of these rows, right? And then there's like someone else, right? And 2012, right? And what's going to happen is when those emails get sent out, they're going to filter this table of students for people in 2011, right? And so that's kind of like the way that relational databases work. It's not really that important because we're not going to go into it. Well, it's still important though because there's a chance that whatever job you end up at will use one. But yeah, like the thing that they do is like the way that they connect data, because that's kind of gets to be the hard part, is like there'll be like what if you wanted to figure out all of the students that were in a particular class, right? And class is a confusing word. I mean, like literally, like like Econ 101, right? So you have class ID, class name, and the class name is going to be like Econ 101, and then you maybe have like student ID, right? And for each student in the class, there will be 111, 112, right? The class ID will be the same, right? 10, 10, right? And so this is how you could like select all the students in a class, and then and this is like econ, right? Econ, right? And then what if you wanted to get all the classes that a student took, right? You've got this table of class IDs and class names, and then it's got the student IDs. And then you've got this table of student IDs with like the names of the students and the year they graduated. You could maybe do what's called joining, right? So let's say I was student ID 111, right? You do this thing called joining, where you would say, all right, 111, student in this table, go connect that with this classes table and see 111 in student ID column and go get this information on the classes that I took, right? So that's kind of how SQL relational databases work, right? They've got these relationships between these tables of data, right? And there's some other technical features to them too. Relational databases, so there's this thing called the CAP theorem, which is like consistent, available, partitionable. And so consistent means that no matter what, like anyone that asks for a certain piece of information will get like the same answer as someone else, right? Available is whenever someone asks for a piece of information, they'll get like the database will be available to send that, give an answer like immediately, right? Because it's always available, right? And P, partitionable, means you can split it into multiple pieces, right? So like, your database could get like really big, right? And so you might want to like store some students in like one database, some students in another one. Yeah, so basically, I don't want to go too far into this, but basically the CAP theorem is like this. There's this idea of consistent, available, partitionable, and you can only be two of those things, right? So people will talk about like a CP database. It'll have to be, if you work this out, it would have to be CP, CA, or AP, right? Yeah, so SQL is CP, right? Or it's relational databases, excuse me, are CP. They're consistent and partitionable, right? So you can break them into multiple pieces, and anyone asking for the same information will always get the same answer, right? But they're not always available. So some people might have to like you could imagine um, if a bunch of people are making, well, let's say we're in a chat, right? And so we're chatting back and forth, and I'm we're constantly updating that chat, right? There might be kind of like a delay because the database isn't always available. In order to ensure that everyone's going to get the same answer back always, relational databases might make the other person wait just to make sure that both people will get the same answer when they're asking for a piece of information. And so Mongo, so an example of where that's really, you have to use a relational database in places where the information always has to be correct, right? And so an example of that is a bank, right? It is a really big problem if it shows $4,000 in my bank account and I'm able to spend that $4,000 somehow, and I actually have $2 in my bank account, right? So banks have to rely on a relational database, right? But think about a blog, right? If I try to retrieve a blog post, right? Or a set of all blog posts, and I'm missing one, right? And it'll be there the next time I refresh. That's not that big of a deal, right? And so for that, you could maybe use what's called a NoSQL database, which is the category that Mongo falls into, right? And so Mongo and Firebase and many of the newer database solutions, because basically, SQL and relational databases reigned supreme for a long time, right? And then it was probably around I think the mid 2000s that these NoSQL ideas started coming out. Yeah, well, I guess, yeah, I mean, because, well, I can't really figure out a justification, but I mean, I guess websites, became more and more interactive. Yeah, and well, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So this basically the NoSQL idea. It's you've got a blog, and what's really it really doesn't matter to you if one user gets a piece of information that's slightly different, it's missing a comment, right, that someone's added, right? That doesn't really matter. But it's really nice if it can be fast, right? So even if I'm making updates to that blog post, right, and I send a request to make an update, right, if you make a request, you'll still get a blog post immediately, right? You won't have to wait until my update is complete, right? So basically, NoSQL databases are it's the idea it doesn't have to be consistent, right? And so why enforce that? And it's better to make it fast, right? Okay, yeah. So anyways, so you guys have Mongo installed, right? All right, so go into your terminal, right? And so you guys just have one window in your terminal, right? Except Jakar set his thing up to have more, like mine has. You guys have one window, right? Is that true? So if you've got one window, then to make it so you can see this on one screen, right-click and say split pane vertically. Oh wait, shit! I always mix this up. Okay, no, it is split pane vertically. Well, in order to split it down the middle. Right. So if you guys have done that, right? Have you done that? Okay, so now in the window to the right, say MongoD, right? And And what this is doing, like basically, just like your server had to listen for requests, you have to open up your database to listen for requests, right? And so this is making your database listen. And it just so happens, the default port for it to listen on, like it's got its own port, right? And I think it must have its own IP. It does, and it's whatever your computer's IP is. But the port that it listens on by default is like 27017. Yeah. So anyways. So then let's go into our other tab, right? Now that we've got our database listening for requests, right? And let's type Mongo, right? And now we've got something kind of going on like what we did with Node, right? Like it looks like we can kind of enter commands here, right? And let's look over back in our our Atom project, right? And let's look in like this this O3 Mongo folder, right? So it says Mongo shell commands.sh. I just put the .sh. So you can you can actually write whole programs that are like written in like the commands that you're like cd and ls and stuff, right? That you're typing into your terminal. Those usually end with the extension .sh. I just did it so that Atom would like lint it properly. Yeah, but so anyway, so we can see here. So Mongo, like here with SQL, we had this idea of like a table, right? And then you put like these rows into it, right? And it had these columns, right? And so like there was this consistent way that any data that goes into this table of students, like it's always going to look like this, right? And so Mongo's a bit different. Instead of tables, it's got collections, right? And you could kind of just think of that as like, I don't know, just like a table. It's like a group of similar things, right? But so let's type in db.add. Oh wait, what is it called? I never do this, right? Like in real coding, but like it's important to understand how this is working. So db.create collection, and let's say example collection, right? Does everyone follow this? Yeah, Jakar, your thing, I mean, this isn't having to do with NPM, so this should work for you too. Yeah, so now, I think this is what you do. No, it's like show collections. Fuck. Yeah. Well, I didn't actually even play it. Well, you know what? For completeness, since I started doing it, let's finish it. Show collections. MongoDB. Yeah, how do I get a list of all collections? Get collection names. Yeah. So you see, I just used Stack Overflow. It is like that and GitHub are like like game changers. But yeah. So oh wait, did I just not paste that? I guess so. So db.get collection names, right? So you can see here I've got example collections, and then I've got system indexes. I don't know what that is. And then I've got widgets, right? But so I've got example collection here, right? That's like kind of the important one. That's what we just made, right? Anyways, so now I've got this collection. Let's try adding something to it, right? so going back to over here, the commands for this, right? So it's like db.insert. All right, so I'm just gonna use exactly what's here, and say db.example collection dot insert. Okay. Right. And it gave me some feedback there. It looks like it worked, right? And now I'm going to do db.example collection dot find, right? And then I'm going to do that's a method, right? So I'm going to put the parentheses after it to run it, right? And check that out, right? So I said db.collection.insert, and I gave this array of these two objects, right? And then I did db.exampleCollection.find, and it looks like they were saved in an example collection, right? So this might be the saving that we're describing, right? Like this is the type of saving that I can reliably retrieve from anywhere, right? And it'll stay. I'm not going to turn off my computer and turn it back on, but if I did, this would still be there, right? But here's an interesting thing. Well, could you kind of describe what we just saved, right? Let's talk about that. Kate, I don't think I've called on you yet.
I'm gonna pass. I don't know
Okay. That's fair. Well, what is confusing you? Like, where did we get lost?
my Mongo DB isn't working, and I just sent it to Mongo this whole time, so I'm just
Okay.
following along.
Let me get you. Let's see what's going on with MongoDB. Oh, you guys say MongoD, right? It's MongoD. It stands for MongoDB, actually, but that's just to make your thing listen, right? The same way that like your server was listening, right? And then over here you say Mongo, right? And then Sam, do you mind helping do
Mine also isn't working, so I'm not exactly.
the car is working? Did you save do the commands that I was doing?
I think
I didn't.
haven't done the
Okay. Yeah. All right. What about you? Where you at?
It's giving me an error, but I don't
Yeah.
I can fix
Okay. All right.
it. I'm already looking for myself.
Okay.
I was confused from it, but I think I gotta do these now.
Okay. So all right. So if you could go ahead and so I'm gonna type just write the commands that I did already up here. So I did db.collection.getNames, right? Or get collection names, right? Let me zoom in here in case this is hard to read. Right? I said db.get collection names. Wait, no. First I did create collection, example collection, right? Then I did the important ones are. Then I did db.exampleCollection.insert, right? And let's just stick with those, right? And these are actually, apart from the example collection bit, they're in the Atom thing inside the Mongo folder, right? Like this, you could just copy and paste in, right? But so these two things right here, just the part after the arrow, because the other part is like feedback, right? So what I have selected and then where my cursor starts. If you guys could get those, well, that would be awesome. Wow.
I don't think I'm just the MongoDB command. Is this correct? Is it a bit selected?
What do you see? Okay. I'm going to do this just now because you never have to do it again after you've done it once. I'm just going to do it, okay? Right. Snapchat ready. Okay, so it's what? So I should read this. What's going on with you?
It's the database file.
Oh shit! Did you not do app-get MongoDB? I did. Oh, okay. So you know some details there, I guess. Yeah, that's it. Reading notes. Yeah. Cool. Alright. Allison's going on. You cool? Do you want to do the thing where you switch your camera?
Well, I had a while.
Yeah. You want to, since you've seen one, you've already done this, you want me to set it up so it'll always be like that?
I kind of like to have.
Oh, you like the tab to set it? Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So then in one tab you want to run MongoDB. Oh, the directory doesn't matter actually. It actually says that. That's like a global command. Right? And same with Mongo actually. You want to go to another tab. Oh, you can work. Alright. So if you've done one of Dan's classes before, he might have gotten it so that you have, basically, I think Jakar did that with you too, actually. Yeah, so he might have set it up so in that class, so that that MongoD thing will be running in the background always on your computer. So like whenever you start up your computer, it's running, like it just in the background always, just for convenience, right?
No, I think it was I was missing the screens and I might have closed the one where it was running, but it's still running in the background.
Do you wanna bet on me that I'm right?
Okay.
Figure it out.
No, I'm
So it's running in the background there. And, well, alright, shit, I guess so this doesn't prove anything. But to run something in the background, you actually have to, you have to do that. You have to kind of do that explicitly. And so, take my word for it, if you turn off your computer, put it back on, like, this would still be here running in the background. You're not taking my word for it.
Should we restart?
I don't think that's worth it, but if you really want to try to prove me wrong, you can do it.
Let's see.
This is another social experiment.
Whatever. I have a database of a carrot.
Okay. Wait, why does it have a carrot?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay. But so you guys have done this, right? You added these things, right? So now you can do db.exampleCollection.find, right? And then you can see these things that you saved, right? And the interesting thing, so these look, what do these things you saved look like, right? Like, based on your knowledge of just, JavaScript, what do these look like? All right, yeah. So these look like JavaScript objects, right? And if you don't know what those are, I really highly suggest you take like the Code Academy class or something as kind of like a refresher, because knowing what an object is real important. Yeah, so these look like JavaScript objects, and so the interesting thing is that's basically what they are. So here's kind of like the magical trifecta. So we've talked about you have on the browser you're running JavaScript because, by the way, that's the only language that runs in the browser, right? on the server with Node, you're now able to run JavaScript as well, right? And so now with your database, with Mongo, you're able to store basically JavaScript objects in your database, right? So if you put this all together, it's like you've made like all of the elements that you need for a website while staying in the world of JavaScript, right? Like SQL is different. It's got like its whole own like language and all this stuff, right? JavaScript, on the other hand, like Mongo, on the other hand, you're storing objects and interacting with objects, and it's great, right? So it's like, master of JavaScript allows you to do everything, right? Whereas previously, like I would have needed to know Python plus SQL plus JavaScript for the front end to make a website, right? So this is cool. So one interesting thing about Mongo, right, is in SQL, like I've got these columns and it's got to like always look this way, right? In Mongo, on the other hand, let's try, I've got these three things that I've inserted already, right? I don't know what is going on right now. Yeah, so I've got these four things that I've inserted already, right? So what happens if I do, just db insert silly thing, right? So it looks like that worked, right? But this thing was totally different from the other things that I had inserted, right? And so you can kind of think with SQL, right, where I have these strict columns and it's this table, something like this isn't allowed. Like in SQL, the data that I'm putting into this database has to be in a particular shape, right? But in Mongo, that's not true, right? Like I can basically, I've made this collection, example collection, which is kind of like making a table, but like I can put anything I want in there, right? And so what this is called, this is an attribute of a database, right? So this is an attribute of MongoDB. MongoDB is schema-less, right? So that means you can put data that it looks however you want it to look into a collection that you've made, right? Like another way that this could work, right? Like if there was a schema, is I could say, stuff that goes into example collection has to be an object that has a property prop, and then the value of that is a string, right? And that always has to be true, right? So that's how that could be, but it's not like that, right? So if it did have that, that would be a schema, but it doesn't have that. But you can imagine, like, a schema is like pretty desirable, right? If I want to have like users, right? Like if I'm Facebook, I let users sign up, right? And I want to like save their information, right? And then I want to use it, in my program. Like I want to be able to run the same program on every single user, right? I want to be able to rely on users like looking a certain way and having like the same it's like imagine if you walk into a room and I write down what your eye color is and what your hair color is and what your name is, right? And then someone else walks into the room and I write down what their shoe size is and what their name is, right? If I want to then, do something conditional, like I want to say hello to everyone with blue eyes, right? I don't have what the eye color is of the second person that walked in the room, right? Because I only stored that for the first person that walked into the room, right? And so I can't perform that same operation on everyone, right? And so that sucks. And I kind of want to, like, if I've got like users, right? Or in this example, I've got people walking into the room, and I want to be able to interact with them in like a defined, uniform way. I want to be storing the same set of information in the same way for all of them, right? So that is where Mongoose comes in, right? And I'm going to skip these, but I think it's a relatively easy idea to imagine. With Mongo, you can also find like a specific thing that you've added to a collection. You can also update something you've added to a collection, and you can also remove something you've added to a collection, right? But I'm just going to assume that's something it's a reasonable thing to get. Yeah.
So with find, we're always searching by the actual value. Is there a way to search by the property rather than
Well, think about this. Think about what you're saying, right? If we were to actually enforce all of the things in a particular collection to look a certain way, what that would mean is all of the properties that each one had would be the same. So then there's no point in querying by that, right? Or searching by that, because they're all going to be the same, right? There might be a way to do it, but I've never wanted to, so I don't know how. So Mongoose, so sometimes constraints are good, right? So Mongoose allows us to set a schema, right? So in the schemaless world of Mongo, right? Mongoose allows us to define a schema. But the thing is, that schema that we're defining with Mongoose is not saved inside of MongoDB, right? It's actually getting created in memory, which is just, while our application is running, but then it goes away afterwards. It's getting created in memory every time we start up our app, right? And so basically, Mongoose is just something that's going to check when you try to save stuff. Is it looking like the way you said it should look earlier in the code you ran, right? So this is what defining a schema looks like, right? So go into your Mongoose folder, right? 04_mongoose, right? And go into the folder DB, and then models, and then something, right? And this might look a little bit weird, this folder structure, but you could imagine that there would be a ton of different models. There would be user, post, like on Facebook, right? There would be a user, there would be a post, there would be maybe a notification, right? So right now there's just something, but you would probably want to put all of those in one place, right? And you would probably want to group that together with all of the stuff that corresponds to your database. So that's why it's in this DB folder, right? By the way, it's kind of funny. When people talk about the folder structure, when they say application architecture, a lot of times that's kind of what they mean. Actually, it's just how your folders are set up. It could also, it's not really a defined term. It could also mean like if you're using Node versus something else, but yeah. Anyways, so check out this schema. We've got something right here, right? Yeah, and so what we're saying, right? We're bringing in our library Mongoose. And I'll tell you, so basically everything in this setup is almost the same, or very similar to what we had in the Express one, right? Except for this one bit, we're like starting up a database before we do stuff, right? Or initializing a connection. Like the database is like listening for connections, right? And we need to connect to it and then start interacting with it from inside of our node program. I know that's confusing. Shit. Well, I don't know. Maybe that makes sense. Does the idea that we would need to like we've got our database running with MongoDB, right? And then like we're running our node program, and we need to connect, just kind of the way that like you connect to a website when you, I mean, that's loosely the way that when you visit a website, like you're like connecting to Google.com. It's like we kind of need to do that with our database, right? So we're doing that like we need to run Node and like go connect to our MongoDB, right? So anyways, so then inside of our models, inside of our something folder, we're saying, all right, bring in Mongoose, and I am gonna not do this right now. This like kind of goofy syntax. It's like something you can do with like the thing that's new with require, like the replace require. But basically, this is what I'm doing, right? So I'm saying new mongoose.schema, right? And then I'm just saying what I'm saying here is expect this things that are going to be put into the collection which this schema is using. Expect them to have a property called a string, and expect the type of that property to be a string, right? And this is actually a shorthand. The way I could type this out, and it could be like this, right? Yeah. So this is setting a schema. It's saying, you know, when I put something into this collection that I'm calling something, it has to be an object with a property a string that has a type of string, right? Like it can't just be, you know, whatever it wants. It's got to be like that, right? And then what I do is I have to register the model with Mongoose, right? Or register the schema, I mean. And so I'm saying mongoose.model something and then something schema, right? And I'm feeding in, you know, this schema I've defined, right? And stepping out of here, I'm just bringing in that folder. I mean that file. Like this, just it's like imagine, you know, if you want to just run the code in a file, but you don't care what's getting exported from it, then you can just do this without, you know, from like or anything like that. Like you don't care what the variable is that comes out. But yeah, so the important thing is the index.js folder at the root of DB. Here, I mean, this could basically honestly be, it would be fair for this to be dark magic for you right now. Like this, it's not like all that essential for you to understand what's going on. But let's just go into it a little bit. Like we are saying, like we're bringing in this library Mongoose, right? Chalk just makes the console output like funny colors. So let's go over here. So you see how this is yellow, blue, and green, right? That's from the colors are from Chalk, right? But so yeah, and so then ignore this promise thing. I mean, you can read about that later. That's something that I'm either going to talk about or ask you to look up on your own. Is what promises are, because that's a pretty important concept. Yeah. So what we're saying here is basically connect to our MongoDB instance that's running on localhost 27017, which I remember it said is the default, right? And we actually are specifying a database, which is actually something I forgot to do when we were running our shell, right? So there's kind of 3 levels of storage, right? There's like an individual item that's in a collection, right? Like when we added something to example collection, like that was something inside of it, right? There's the collection, right, which is like an umbrella over everything inside of it, right? And then on top of that, there's the database, right? So let's pretend you wanted to run Instagram and Facebook off of like the same server, right? You would need to store them in different databases, right? They're just different stuff, right? And the way you switch a database is you say use, and then you give the database name. Right? And now you're in a database, and when I say db dot whatever, it's going to do that. And so, anyway, so the way you connect to that to a specific database with Mongoose is you say slash, like you give this URL right here, right? And then you give slash the database name, right? So this little program right here is connecting. That's embarrassing. Yeah, use Airbnb, not our place, but yeah. But so we're connecting to the message store database, which is running on localhost and then 27017, right? So that's basically what you need to know is going on here. And then what we're doing right here is something a little bit weird. Like I've got inside of this commands folder, I've got create and read, these 2 different files, right? And what I'm doing is I'm like letting the user pick which one gets run by the 3rd console argument. And what I'm doing there is like, so I'm saying node index.js and then create. And so that's going to say like go run this file, right? And the same way I can do node index.js read, and then I'm running the read file, right? So if you guys go into this 04_mongoose folder, like if you cd into that and then you do npm install, you should be able to do these things too, as long as you have MongoDB like running somewhere, right? Yeah, and so let's look at these files, right? So yeah, what's up? Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we're close to done, so it's yeah, but yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. Wait, are we not going to have a card then? Okay, all right. Well, as soon as someone has to use the bathroom, then I guess class will end. Yeah, so yeah, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we're almost done. So basically, oh, I think I actually, yeah. So what we're doing is we're saying remember we were doing with Mongo in the shell, we were saying insert, and then we were able to add things to a collection, right? So Mongoose has kind of convenience methods for that, right? and so you're able to access the model which you defined over in your models file, right? So go over there real quick. So we set mongoose.model, and then we set what it is right here, this schema object, right? You're able to retrieve that now, and then you're able to say a new one of those, and then dot save, and it'll get saved, right? And let's just to make sure this is working, let's do node index.js create now, and then read, and it looks like IMA will be saved. This like truncated thing that I just made is in there, sure enough, right? Yeah, and so this is saving something the mongoose way, right? Versus, I mean, we were doing it before in the shell, right? But if you're doing this in the middle of your program and you're using Mongoose, which is a good idea because it does this whole schema thing, and everyone uses it, and so especially when you're new, you should probably do what everyone else is doing before you do your own thing, right? This is the Mongoose way of doing that insert thing that we were doing, right? And then over here with read, we're now doing doing dot find, right? Which is the same thing we were doing before from the shell also, and we're able to retrieve the stuff that's saved, right? Yeah. So that what I want you to do for homework is going to be kind of ambitious, but I mean, hey, you have all weekend, and nothing else better to do, I'm sure. So what I'd like you to do is we've got Express, right? And we've got this example of Express working over here, right? And then we've got over here this example of Mongoose working, right? And so what I'd like you to do is to actually make your routes do Mongoose stuff, right? So you're seeing how you can do Mongoose stuff over here, and that's really the only point of this little app in this Mongoose folder. Like this whole commands thing, the way that I'm doing it, like you'd never have a real application run like this. Like the point is just really the code that's in here and here and inside this DB folder, right? Back over here, looking at the server index.js inside of Express, right? You can see these routes right here, and you could imagine if you put you have this way to dynamically feed in content, right? Wait for and then time, right? You can feed that in as a param, right? So that's a way to feed in something, right? That's coming from the browser, right? And you can imagine, what if this was a string, right? And just it is with our Mongoose schema over there, right? And then you were to somehow inside of this, you were to actually save something into Mongo, right? With the Mongoose methods, right? Yeah, and then you could maybe retrieve as well, right? One thing, yeah. So this is going to be hard. I mean, if this class is for you, then this is going to be hard, right? There's kind of a lot that you'll have to to figure out to make that work, right? But I think you can do it. Yeah. So at least I like really hope so. And so yeah, so that's what I think should be for homework, right? Yeah.